Okay, hi, I'm Peter Roper, and this is Potluck Politics, and we're doing a program called 2020 Vision, Voting in a Pandemic. We're very lucky today to have Secretary of State Denise Merrill join us, who's going to talk us through some of the issues with voting during a pandemic. She has been the Secretary of State for 3 terms. She's worked on some of these issues pretty hard already. Before that, she was a representative from Mansfield, Chaplin area, so she has some local connection to, local experience, which I think helps in this case. Her focus has been on modernizing Connecticut's elections, providing improved business services, and enhancing access to public records. So she doesn't just do voting, she does a lot of things. So Secretary of State is very busy, very important. Thank you very much, Denise, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Any presidential election year is a big deal for your office. But Russian interference in 2016 election meant cybersecurity would be a huge issue for you in 2020. Then along came coronavirus, adding another daunting challenge to your job and everything else that we do. The League of Women Voters and the NAACP are suing your office to be sure that people can vote safely. No one knows what November will look like, so your job must be pretty stressful at this point. So we really do appreciate you taking the time to share with our viewers what's really happening. It's important to the people to know what's going on and to make sure they get out and do their part for democracy. So thank you very much again.
Sure. And thanks for reminding me about the cybersecurity issues. You know, everybody's talking about absentee ballots.
I know.
That's still out there, and it's still happening. So,
that could be huge.
Yes, it really could be.
We hope for the best, but I don't think we're going to be able to ride that one out easily.
No.
So my wife and I have already received our absentee ballot applications for the presidential primary on August 11th. You're sending those out to everybody who's eligible to vote, I guess.
Correct.
And
yep.
So if someone gets one, that means they can vote in the primary, whether it's Republican or Democrat primary.
That's right. They have to be registered with either Republican or Democratic Party. There's a lot of confusion always about that because people don't like that, but that is—
in their heads, they know who they are, but they don't necessarily have it down officially.
Right. And, you know, I mean, there's an argument that we should probably have an open primary, but that has not— we haven't passed muster with the parties. The parties are the ones that do the rules for these primaries. So,
right.
Yeah. And by the way, I should add, active voters are the ones that got the applications. Sometimes, you know, there's something called an inactive list, which is where we put people if they don't respond to that postcard you should get every year asking you if you're still there. Yeah. You go on the inactive list. So when you hear all this talk about how bad the lists are, it's actually not true. We do a canvass every year. We don't. The local towns do all the maintenance on the lists. Our office does not touch the list. And so, you know, they do the best they can with a very mobile society.
And people ignore their mail sometimes. And
sure. Yeah. I mean, this year we're hearing it because we sent these applications out, as you say, and they're new because they have the little COVID check off, and we can talk about that. But also, like, you know, they're saying, well, all these people who haven't lived here for 5 years, they've been dead for 2 years, and they're still getting an application in the mail. Well, that's perfectly possible, but as long as they don't vote, then you're fine. And all you should do is, if you get one of those, which I did actually for one of my children who just moved a couple of weeks ago. So you put return to sender. It goes to our office. We send it to the local people, and they take them off the list and put them from active to inactive. Now, it still means if they can still come back to life as a voter if they show up with proper ID, but at least you're flagged that they're probably no longer at that address.
Yeah, I've read that some states are actually removing people from the list if they're inactive, and that seems a little extreme to me. I hope that's not what's happening in Connecticut, but I don't.
It's not happening in Connecticut. We're very, very careful before we take someone off a list. Yeah, it's that's another one of the big things going on across the country, attempts to pare down the lists very inappropriately. There's a lot of federal law about this. It's gone to court several times in several states. And so far, you know, we're maintaining those rules. It's very hard, and it should be, to take anyone off a list.
Yes, I agree. So up until now, rules for voting absentee in Connecticut have been pretty restrictive. What excuses do voters actually have before they can obtain an absentee ballot?
Yeah, normally that's all defined in our state constitution, which is part of the problem. We can't change it very easily.
Do many states have it set up that way? Because I've never heard of another state that has it in their constitution.
I believe at this point, no other state has it in their state constitution. New York's, it still may be in New York's, but they've just overrode it. So, you know, we're now alone. We have the least opportunity to vote for any voters in the country now. It's not a good distinction.
No.
I'm very unhappy about it, as you can tell. But, you know, we have a long way to go. So anyway, it's in the state constitution. There's 4 reasons, or as we call them, excuses, that you can get an absentee ballot normally. And it's pretty restrictive. It's like if you're out of town all day on election day, if you have a physical disability, in some cases, if it's a permanent physical disability, you can get a ballot, and a couple of other things. But no one's ever looked too much at the one provision that says if a voter is unable to get to the polls due to illness, they can have an absentee ballot. So that's the one that's giving all of us agita, trying to figure out how we fit this COVID situation into that definition. There's also a statute which can be modified by the governor or the legislature. And that's how we got to where we are today, at least for the primary. Because during an emergency, which we're in still until September 9th, I think, the governor can change statutes to meet the demand, so to speak. So that's what he did. And we talked about it for quite a while. I admire, you know, that he went forward and he realized that people would feel scared to go to the polls. They don't want to, here he is telling people, if you're over 65, don't go out, wear a mask, avoid crowds. And yet we're telling people they can't, you know, you can't vote from home because you don't have the proper excuse. So he modified the statute to include, in a pandemic, if there's a stated emergency, he would use his emergency powers to say that people would be able to vote from home by mail with an absentee ballot if they felt like they might have COVID, or that they would be endangered if they went to the polls. So that's what you see on your application now. There's like some little boxes you can check to see if you're eligible for an absentee ballot. One of them is the one at the top that says something about COVID, and I forget the exact words. Virtually anybody can claim that exception now, but just for the primary, because that's the only time we're in this emergency. So now we need the legislature to come in and ratify that if we want that to be the case for November.
My understanding was that the statute says something about his or her illness, so it's even more restrictive than the Constitution. Is that
yeah,
kind of a problem?
That is a problem, yes.
If it said illness, you could say, well, COVID is an illness. It could affect everybody.
That was exactly.
That might be what they change, isn't it? From talking to my rep, it sounds like that might be what they try to change.
I hope so, yes, because they could do 2 things. They could do both of the above. They could also mirror his language, say the same thing he did, which was basically anyone can do this if we're in an emergency, if there's no vaccine, and if, you know, if we're in a pandemic. And also take out the more restrictive thing about how, in the statute it says a voter can get an absentee ballot if they're unable to get to the polls due to his or her illness.
Right.
So that, as you say, it's even more restrictive, and certainly they could take that out. But so that's one thing they're mulling over. I do believe there will be some addressing of this issue in the coming special session.
Yeah, let's hope. Anybody listening, please work on that.
Yes, please.
So there is a chance the governor could do the same type of emergency depending on where we are in November. So there's that hope, I guess, but it would be better if the legislature stepped up, in my opinion, to
absolutely
make it work.
Yeah, of course, because, you know, you can't be operating under emergency orders all the time. I respect his reticence to do that because, you know, you want the legislative body to act and to pass the laws, and it has much more permanence that way, and much more, you know, acceptance.
I have to give you a chance here to respond to President Trump's accusations that voting by mail is very, very dangerous and totally open to fraud, even though he has done it himself. The military all do it, elderly do it. And like you were saying, I think before, is Republicans tend to vote in large numbers absentee because they're
Right. Yeah.
elderly and they don't want to go out.
Yeah, it's
Talk about
interesting.
that a little bit.
Even in Connecticut, where we usually don't vote much by absentee, about 8% usually. The towns with the biggest number of absentee ballots are Greenwich, Fairfield, West Hartford, and some of the other Fairfield County towns. Mostly people who commute back and forth to New York and want that opportunity. So, and also in this case, I think the elderly, people over 65, like myself, are worried. Yeah, well, I mean, we're worried about going to the polls. We've been told by the governor and many others to stay home, stay safe. So it really almost doesn't make sense not to do that if you are at all fearful, because we have so many checks and balances for absentee ballots in the state. I mean, many more than most places, which is one of the reasons, ironically, it's making it difficult to process. If we're going to have a lot more, the things that the town clerks have to go through to process these, and we don't allow them to open them at all until election morning, which is going to be pretty difficult to get the results in time, because if there's thousands of ballots coming in and you can't even open them until election day, that's another kind of problem. So, you know, we really have to change a lot of the things we're doing, and we haven't had a chance to address it. So we're just going to do the best we can. And fortunately, we got a big federal grant. Our delegation was very helpful in getting that for us, about $5 million. And that's the money we're using to, first of all, mail those applications so people can get an absentee ballot easily, and also to save the town's money, because that would be a very big cost. And also to do things like secure the polling places and give the towns more money to hire more people to process these ballots and that sort of thing. And we have a pretty good amount of money. So towns have all filed these plans on what they think they need, and we will reimburse them 100% for any of those extra costs.
Wow. So we're getting a little out of order here, but that's all right. Talk a little bit more about the possibility of cheating. You have to have signatures on the envelope that holds the ballot, and then they're checked against the list. Is that how it works?
Yes. Yeah. I forgot. Let me go back to the President Trump claim for a moment.
I don't want to ignore that, because he's using that regularly and just undermining the election, I think.
He's just making it up. There is absolutely no evidence, number one, that that's happened in large numbers at all. And when you think about it, think about how difficult it would be to vote for somebody else. In fact, I would argue that absentee ballots are probably more secure. First of all, they're paper. They have somebody's signature right on it. They're checked against the list. Once you send your ballot in, it's checked in the little AB section of our list. And therefore, if somebody tried to vote twice, it's immediately on the list. I mean, we have computerized lists now. This is not 100 years ago, where we're still operating in little cards. So there's many checks and balances. And it's very destructive, I think, for these claims to be made constantly, because at a time in our history when things are so contentious and so partisan, just keep throwing rocks in that pond and making people nervous about their vote is just so destructive to our democracy. I mean, people have always had, Americans, I think, have had a rather touching confidence in their elections. Nobody asked too many questions about, well, how did this all work? And aren't people fraudulently voting? That only started happening about 10 years ago, honestly. Before then, I mean, I think the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was the last time any of this was seriously questioned or even dealt with. So it's very discouraging to have, on top of the Russian interference with our election, all the disinformation campaigns that are going out to people and still happening. That, I think, is one of the most destructive things going on. And it's coming from Russia and China and Iran and all kinds of, and internal domestic bad actors. these bots are sending you information about candidates, about our democracy, about elections, about fraud, and all that stuff. And it's fake. It's bots from other countries. So that's another whole front we're having to fight on to keep people's confidence in the election. Because if people lose confidence in the fact that their vote is counted and counted accurately and that the results are fair, we will have a really serious problem on our hands come November. And I am very worried that this will be a contested election again, the likes of we haven't seen before, except maybe in 2000. And I think it might be even more so.
Yeah, there are a lot of signs that the Trump playbook is now not to accept the results. He's already setting the stage, and that's pretty scary.
It's terribly destructive, I think, to the psyche of the American people.
I do have to note too that there are a number of states now that do all of their voting by mail. Isn't that correct?
Oh yes, yeah, it's been true for years actually. Oregon and Washington state really started it, the vote by mail, and they vote almost entirely, I think, by mail now. There's about 10 states, growing number every year: Utah, Montana, Michigan, and then Vermont just passed vote by mail. Massachusetts, the governor just signed vote by mail. So, and Colorado, I mean, there's quite a number now. And what that means is you voted in the last election, you are mailed not an application, you are mailed your ballot. You fill out your ballot. You can ask anybody you want to help you fill it out. You sit around the kitchen table and talk about it, who you're going to vote for, whatever. You then send it back either by mail. You can vote anywhere in the county. They have early voting in most of these states, like I told you. So like in Colorado, I think you have about 5 to 10 days where you can drop it off in any one of these ballot drop boxes all over the state. And they love it. They have the highest turnout in the country, and people don't seem to be that concerned about, I don't know, people consulting with them for their ballot and that sort of thing. I mean, I think there's always been a concern about like the frail elderly in housing, assisted living and nursing homes. That's taken care of with federal law. We have supervised absentee balloting in many of the nursing homes now already, which is done by local registrars. So, I think this notion that somehow there's going to be this massive amount of ballot fraud, I'm not even sure what it means anymore. It's just sort of thrown out there constantly. And if you stop to think about it for 5 minutes, you'll realize how difficult it would be for even just one person to do one fake absentee ballot. You'd have to forge it, first of all.
Seems like it'd be an awful lot of work to change enough votes that way to make a difference, because it was one vote at a time, and that's not how they do it usually. They do it by shutting down machines and closing polling places. That works better.
Yeah, that's a lot easier, honestly. It's a lot easier to suppress the vote than it is to get people to vote, frankly.
Yeah. So why do you think we're behind? We're usually a progressive state, and why is it that Connecticut has lagged? Because it seems like they have.
Yes, I think we're now.
People have tried. I know you've tried. I know other people have tried, but why?
Yeah, it's because it's been blocked in the legislature, because it's in our state constitution. Constitutions are really, really hard to change. And so we would need, like I say, a 75% vote of legislators in both houses, House and Senate. And then it would have to go on the ballot the following year, because everybody gets to vote on whether they want to do these things, which seems very fair to me. And then, so even if we did that right now, we could pass a constitutional amendment and say, we want early voting, we want vote by mail. If 75% of those legislators voted yes, it would be on the ballot in November, and next election, we would have all those things. We have not been able to get the political will to do it. And I can't really explain it, to be honest, because like Vermont did have it in its state constitution, and they just passed vote by mail by almost unanimous vote, Republicans and Democrats. So why in this state we've been so hidebound, I'm not exactly sure.
I don't know. But
the
early voting is the same thing, right? It was tried last session, I think, and
correct.
It came close, but the Republicans had enough votes to stop it.
That's right.
They wouldn't even let it go to the voters, is what I understood. Is that how it worked? It had to go to the voters?
Yeah, it passed by something like 60% in the House and something like that in the Senate, but that's not enough. So now it has to go back to another legislature. So that would be next year when you have a new group. They have to pass it by more than 50%. And then it could go on the next statewide ballot, which won't be till 2022. And then we'd finally get it in law, maybe in 2023.
It's hard to keep people's attention on an issue that long too, and there's so many other issues to dwell on. It's tough.
Yep.
So it does seem like, though, if people could vote over a number of days, it would make it easier for the whole process to work. It seems like that gives people more chances to vote, which I think is good. Yep. And it would take some of the stress off election day, because election day can be really hectic, especially in cities, and especially where people line up for hours. It's like,
that's right. Exactly right. I always like have you ever given a wedding for anybody? Mm-hmm. I had a wedding for my daughter. This is years ago now. And it's like everything has to come off perfectly on that one big day, right?
You get one shot.
One shot. And of course, what happened to us is she got married in Vermont. It's like destination wedding. We had this $5,000 tent that we rented. Oh. And of course, the moment of the wedding, there was a major flash storm, lightning, thunder, pounding rain, collapsed the tent, washed away the dance floor, and we had to move everybody inside. So you get my point. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot of pressure.
That made elections seem insignificant, didn't it?
It was terrible.
Oh, wow.
She's still married, so I guess it worked. I don't know.
Yeah. So the downside of more absentee voters is going to be counting the ballots. You said it has to be done the morning of election day.
that will be a challenge. I would love to see us at least have them be able to open the envelopes and, get them organized, make the copies and all the things they have to do to get ready to count the ballots, and then just run them through the machines on election day. I think that would be very helpful.
These are the same ballots that go through the machines? So they
you just put them through the machine on election day, but it's just because they have 2 envelopes they have to open, and it's a lot of work. And that's, we still aren't set up for that. Hopefully, I mean, they've hired extra help, most of them, but still, it's a lot on election day. So again, the legislature is apparently considering lightening up some of that. I don't know if that'll happen, but that's all in statute.
And that could be made safer for workers, because that's going to be at the town hall or somewhere, and people
can that's right.
and work on it.
Yeah, that's another thing. Yeah, we'll have to keep them all 6 feet apart with masks and protective equipment, which we're purchasing for all the towns. But yes, it's, again, just a lot of pressure on one day.
Okay, so local officials are in charge of the actual logistics of making the voting work. But you give them lots of education and directives, so it goes pretty smoothly, usually.
Yes, it does, actually. I think we were getting better and better at this until this came along, and then it laid bare some of the limitations, I think.
And is this schedule on track at the moment, as far as you can tell, to make all this work? Because it's coming up quickly, unfortunately. I mean, we got the primary coming, which will be sort of a test, but.
You're right. It will become a tough case. Yes, I think something like 95% of the towns have given us their safe polling plan, as we're calling it. By the way, this is on my website. And I always encourage everyone to go to the website and just check your registration to make sure you're still living there, that it's the right party, all those things, because clerical error does occur. So it's myvote.ct.gov. And if you go there, there's a voter lookup tool, and you can look up your name and make sure you're registered and where you vote and all that stuff. But you can also do a lot of other things there, and you'll see the safe polling plan for the state and what the towns should be doing to apply for the resources to get extra help, to get the PPE, to make sure, tell us if they're going to change a polling place, which is always very confusing for people. Let us know. We have to approve it, because you saw in places like Atlanta and Milwaukee and Kentucky, they all assumed, everybody's going to vote by absentee. So they closed hundreds of polling places, and you ended up, it was chaos, particularly in Milwaukee, where people actually did contract the virus right there in line.
Yeah.
So we don't want any of that. We're taking a very dim view of towns that want to change polling places, but we recognize that in some cases, the polling place might be too small to be able to keep people 6 feet apart and that sort of thing. I guess I'd have to say we're planning for anything. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how many.
School's going to be closed, right? So there won't be the problem with kids.
Primary, but that's an issue for November, yeah.
Well, we're getting close to the end here, so I'm going to give you a chance to talk about cybersecurity, which we didn't talk about much, and summarize anything you want to get in here. Your last chance.
Yeah, this is another whole set of federal resources and activities that are ongoing as well to make sure that our local infrastructure is all secure, because we have to make sure people are doing things like changing their passwords. You know, we have dual authentication now. We have something called a remote desktop, which means we can tell if somebody's getting locked out or any of that, because we house the, this is all about the voter list, just the list, because that's the only thing that's really on the internet. When you vote, you're voting on a scanner, basically, a very simple machine, not connected to the internet, has a paper trail. So we're good
all the ballots are safe, so they could be recounted if they had to be, right?
Correct. We keep them in the little basket, and that's all, we're good there. But the voter list is the one that was attacked by Russian IP addresses in 2016. We have very strong evidence of that, but we have secured the state system. But every town has a drop point, and every registrar and clerk has the access to our system. So we have to make sure they're running the right software, that they're changing passwords and doing all those things. We are working with the National Guard. They are going out to the towns to assess every town to make sure that they're secure as well. So, you know, there's a lot of work going into that as well. I think it's very timely. Boy, could we use some new technology though. I tell you, we have just not invested in the technology for elections that we should have. For example, we should be able to track people's ballots. You know, if you apply for a ballot, I mean, the Postal Service can tell you what mail's coming today, right? We should be able to do that with the ballot.
Oh, shipping now, you can find out where your package is.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it.
We could do that if we had the technology to do it. I mean, it requires a bit of an investment. And we're going to need some new scanners at some point. They're like 20 years old now. And there's newer scanners that are better with the technology. Again, they're more secure, they're easier to work. So we're going to have an investment in this country at some point. I'm glad Congress seems to be paying attention to this at this point, but you know, we're way behind, and we shouldn't be. This is the core function of a democracy. So I hope we can do better. I think this has been a real wake-up call, honestly, for all of us. But I think we're going to be okay in Connecticut. We're on schedule. We're on course. So I'm feeling good about it today.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably due to people like you who are actually working at it. And
well, thank you.
I want you to know you're appreciated, because I've been following you during your 3 terms, and I know that you have worked on this issue seriously, and I appreciate it. So
well, thank you. But I have to give a shout out to all those hundreds of people down there in the towns that really work hard on this. This is not easy stuff anymore. It used to be, it was like a quiet little job you got on the side, but boy, this is hard work now.
Yeah. It's a long day, and it's a lot to worry about.
Absolutely.
And now we have a virus to throw into the mix.
Oh yeah, I know. It's, I just hope we get through all this. I have to give it to the governor. I think he's done a great job in controlling all of us and controlling the virus. Right now, we're the best in the country. I think we've had.
I know we're pretty close to the top because we've done the hard work to get here, and
that's right.
Hopefully, we keep doing it.
Don't you think a lot of it's the culture of the state too? I think we're pretty smart.
Partly, it's a smart, progressive type state, so that's good.
Yeah, yeah. So right now, things are looking pretty good, and I hope they stay that way.
Great. Glad to hear a positive note. That's good. Thank you very much, Denise, for participating. We appreciate it. Hope they got this all recorded.
Yeah.
Good luck on your efforts, and if we can help you again, let us know. We'd be glad to run another program when you've got more time and can talk about more issues.
Sure.
Thank you, Denise Merrill, Secretary of State. We appreciate it a lot. We appreciate what you do and with sharing, so that's great. Thank you to all the viewers. I'm Peter Roper, urging you to get informed, to remember in November, and stay well. Thanks.